Folks, welcome back to the Bobby Bo Show. Here's the moves it starts with. It's another Caro Kann, and after knight to c3, d captures e4, knight captures e4, I play knight to f6. And now the main line is just to take here, and after I take back with my center pawn, they double up my pawns here. But instead, they play the worst chess move in general, which is moving their f pawn. They play f3. And why is this the worst move in general? Sometimes f3 is a good move, but not now. The engine already likes me, and it's because every time you play f3, you're weakening the king on the diagonals here. If the king castles, now you're weak on this diagonal. Maybe I take this pawn with check later. And now the knight usually comes to f6, but now the knight can't come to f6. So it has to go here. And it takes longer for the knight to come into the game. And all of the weaknesses combined just makes the f pawn a little bit of a bad move most of the time. And this is one of those times. So keep an eye on these diagonals. And remember that the king is very weak whenever you see the f pawn move forward. And they really want me to take their knight here so they can take back with their pawn, and then I have two pawns in the center here, but I'm not forced to take back with their knight. I'm actually wanting them to take my knight. So I just play bishop to f5 here, attacking the knight, but now they play bishop to d3, defending the knight, and that's an inaccuracy because now this is a free pawn. But I missed that. Instead, I'm just thinking about developing and castling, so I play e6 so my bishop can come out. And now knight captures f6, queen captures f6, and we trade pieces. So there goes the knights and the bishops, but now my queen is in the middle of the board. Their king is still in the center. I'm getting ready to castle soon, and maybe I'm targeting this pawn too. So this queen's doing a lot, but I need to get my other pieces out, and so do they. So they play knight to e2, and then bishop to d6, and I'm getting ready to castle. My bishop is now in line with the king if they castle. And now, instead of castling, which they should do, they play c4 first. I don't know why. What does c4 accomplish here? I guess they're trying to go here, but why don't they just do c4 later? Maybe the knight's coming to here and they didn't want to block it off. But they need to castle. King safety. Their king's already weak on these diagonals, but I castle. Now, once again, instead of castling, knight to c3. They haven't moved their bishop or their queen or their rooks or castled yet. They've moved their knight a couple times now, when it should have just been on f6 the entire time. And here, c5 is pretty strong because we want to break open the middle and attack the king while they're not castled. But instead, I'm trying to finish development. So knight to d7. Now the knight can come up. And after b3, getting ready to fianchetto the bishop instead of castling, my best move is just probably e5 or knight to f6, continuing development, because the knight's not really doing anything back here. But also, I haven't moved this rook yet. Last piece I haven't moved. And if the rook goes to d8, it's in line with their queen here. And if I bust open the middle soon, that queen could be in danger. Knight to f6, bishop moves sometime, you know. So setting up tactics. And now, once again, instead of castling, which would be the best move, bishop to b2. What are you doing? You need to castle. But that's 1,400 rated players for you. What's your rating? Let me know in the comment section. Maybe I'll show you how to beat your rating level. But now knight to f6. And the engine says -2 already for me. That's an advantage, a winning advantage, even though the material is still even because they haven't castled yet. And what do you think their best move is? Castling. But do you think they're going to castle? No, they play g4, attacking my queen here. Oh my goodness. And this pawn's defended by the queen. And now I have to decide where to move my queen. But they really are doubling down on this king side weakness here. They haven't castled yet. The middle is open. Maybe they're going to castle queen side, but I don't think that's safe either. And they're just further weakening their king side. Like, if I had my queen on h4, that'd be a check that they couldn't block with this pawn now. And they're trying to be too fancy, when really the best moves are actually just the most common sense, basic chess development, good chess principles. And this isn't really about knowing an opening. This is just about knowing basic chess opening principles, like castling and moving all your pieces out. But your queen is under attack, and hopefully you thought about where to move it. And of course, the most logical square is just to move it forward to f4. Queen to f4, right? Such an active spot, hitting the pawn in the middle here. This a2 pawn, still hitting the pawn here on f3, and just an active diagonal, right? Maybe you're going to check the king here. So f4, probably the first move you considered. But before you think about moves, think about where they can go. So if I go queen to f4, can they attack my queen on the next move? And of course, yes, knight to e2, right? Hitting the queen. That blocks the pawn now. You can just take the pawn if they play knight to e2. So queen to f4 is pretty good, right? And I almost played it. And right before I let go of the piece, I remembered sometimes bishops move backwards. So I said, let's think about that real quick. What if they play bishop to c1 after I play queen to f4, attacking my queen? Then where do I move next? And there's no squares to go to. So my queen would be trapped if I played queen to f4. And I realized that right before I let go of it. And instead I played the best move, queen to g5. And now the threat is queen to h4. But all they could think about was bishop to c1, trying to trap my queen. And after bishop to c1, I just played queen to h4 check. They can't block it, so king to d2, and they're trying to run away. So the most obvious move, queen to f2 here, and that's what I'm going to play here so the king cannot move backwards. But really, there's a better move here. And I'm just going to play queen to f2 check and then take the pawn here, check, right? And I think that's good because then I can open up the pieces. But if I just play e5, then I can break open the middle, get both the rooks in, all the pieces come up, and that's just the best move here. And queen to f2 is still winning, but it's just a little bit less winning. And I still have to play a good game. And after they play queen to e2 to block, now I play queen to d4 check. And now my attack just can't happen yet because it's harder for me to get all my pieces in. And if the queen was on d8 instead, then it would be in line with my rook, and their rook couldn't slide over. So it would just be way better if the queen was on d8 and I played e5 first. But now the king can get out, and after king to c2, their king is still not safe. I'm up a pawn. They haven't developed their rooks or their bishop, but I should still be winning. But I had to figure it out, and I played bishop to b4, hitting the knight now, threatening to take and win material. So they play bishop to b2, defending it. Now I want to get my queen out of the way of the bishop, so queen to f4 back to a good square. But now bishop to c1 attacks my queen, and I need to just go back to queen to b7. But first, I go back to d4. And after bishop to b2, I think about it for a little bit, and then I realize what I need to do, and that's just to play a winning endgame when I'm up a pawn and I'm more developed. I'm going to try to trade off all the pieces and get my rooks on this open file and get everything behind the pawns, try to trade off pieces, and try to promote. So really, my queen does need to be on c7 here. So after bishop captures c3, bishop captures c3, I go back to f4, planning on coming back to c7. And I probably had a winning attack there if I didn't trade off material, but definitely an easier endgame for me. And after bishop to d2, attacking my queen, I'm just going to go back to c7 like I planned here. But there's actually just rook takes bishop here. I can just take it. And that might seem like a bad trade, rook for bishop. But my next move is queen captures f3 after the queen moves. And it still seems like a bad trade, but now the knight can come to e4, the rook can come up and over. And with the right moves, I'm going to force them to give material back, and I'm going to be winning. But I did not calculate this, didn't even think about it, just went ahead with my plan here and played queen to c7. And I'm about to double up my rooks and try to trade everything off. And after bishop to c3, it seems like they want to take my knight, double up my pawns, open up my king, maybe create some weaknesses on my own king. But all the pieces are getting traded off. This is just helping me with my plan here. And after rook to d7, about to double up, they take my knight, and it's a big mistake. Now it says I'm crushing, minus 1.5 on the engine, because after g captures f6, plus one pawn, but it's a winning endgame. And if I could just double up my rooks right now, it would be devastating. So they have to stop that with rook a to d1 here. But now the rooks are doubled up. Great move here. And I'm trying to trade everything down and then take this pawn on h2. And they see me threatening this h2 pawn perhaps, and they want to try to push these pawns down. So they play h4. But now let's just trade all the rooks off. And they have to take with the king here, but they take with the queen. Either way, still losing. But now queen to h2 check. Great move, hitting the king and the pawn. They block with the queen here. Best move, just to take the pawn. But isn't it really the best move? Sure, but you can just take their queen right now. And after they take back with their king, it's just a winning game. You're up a pawn, and it's a winning king and pawn endgame. And maybe you don't see why it's winning yet, but we're about to see, because I have 4 pawns and a king versus 3 pawns, and there's 3 pawns versus 3 pawns here, so no worries. And their king is all the way back here. My king's coming up, king to g7, and we're just going to run it down. And after king to e3, there's no stopping you, unless you throw the game with b5, because you're terrible at endgames, and you don't realize that now they can just play king to d4, and then they're taking your pawns and promoting, and you're going to promote too, but it's going to be a draw. So don't throw the game here like me, but instead of king to d4, they take the pawn, and now I'm winning again. They can't do anything, but they play f4, and what now? Well, there's one way to just break open here, and that's h5. And when they take, they have doubled pawns that you're just going to gobble up. And if they push, then you just trade them off. And then you push these pawns down. So they decide to trade here. Now king to h6, going to take these pawns. King can't defend, but they play king to d4. And I'm taking the pawns. Just have to clear the way for these pawns here. And king to c5. Now e5 here, and we're just running it down. They can't stop it. They can trade pawns here, but they can't take it after king to d5 because I can just play f6. Now, anytime if their king just comes down here and takes this pawn cannot be stopped. So guaranteed victory royale now, and king to e4, trying to block my pawns, but king captures h4, a3, and king to g4. And now my king just clears the way for the pawn here. They can't make it down here fast enough. We'll trade pawns. Now the pawns block each other. f5, check, king moves, and we'll just run it down now. They try to go for my pawn here, but I'll just get a queen here, take their pawn, we'll get another queen, and we'll checkmate. They resign now, but there's the checkmate. Thanks for watching the Bobby Wo Show. Smash the like button. Have an excellent rest of your day. Goodbye.